I think Lyndon Johnson and his advisors have decided quietly to embark on an escalation of U.S. involvement. I think they enter 1965 with that basic position.
At this point, there's also an increasing military pressure from not only the National Liberation Front, but also from the North Vietnamese Army, which is infiltrating through the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Ultimately, President Johnson decides that they have to intervene militarily, and the decision is made to start with air power.
One early morning in March of 1965, Dr. Quat called me on the phone, "Come to my place right away. There are some important things."
The setbacks, both politically in South Vietnam, where there is continuing political turmoil in Saigon, the increased brazenness and willingness of the Viet Cong to launch attacks, the degree to which American advisors are increasingly vulnerable themselves to being attacked, all of this feeds a growing sense that we're at a crossroads here.
And Dr. Quat said to me that there are 3 Marine battalions from the American landing in Da Nang. I was surprised. How come that it comes so suddenly like that? The military situation, well, of course, is very dangerous, but how come this very sudden development like that?
I think the lack of communication between not only the White House and the government of South Vietnam, but also the military command and the South Vietnamese Joint General Staff and the U.S. Embassy has a lot to do with a lack of trust. I think ultimately there is a sense that South Vietnam is an ally, but there very much is a senior subordinate relationship there.
With regard to Operation Rolling Thunder, Johnson and the White House wanted to incrementally raise the bombing, so at some particular point, rational people would decide that they didn't want to prosecute the war in the South. The only problem is that they did not get to define rationality on the part of North Vietnam. The White House imposed so many restrictions that it really achieved nothing other than putting those air crews at risk.
Operation Rolling Thunder was a mistake because it did not take into account the psychology of the North Vietnamese and the fact that the North Vietnamese communists controlled all information going to their population. So they explained the bombing as an obvious attempt by the U.S. to take over control and act just as the French had acted many years before. And that was all the motivation that was needed to raise thousands and thousands of volunteers to both repair the bombing and to go south.
There were dissenting voices in the American government, there's no question about it, and in Congress. The Vice President of the United States, Hubert Humphrey, says, "I don't think we can win this thing, and I don't think it's necessary for us to win it."
First he started bombing the North, and then when it looked like South Vietnam was going to fall, regardless of his bombing, he began to send troops into South Vietnam. Before this happened, my family thought the communists were going to win, and they and a lot of people in the middle class in Saigon were thinking of fleeing again. When LBJ sent troops in, it's like, they saved us at the last moment. The middle class in Saigon was very, very happy.
I think it's worth saying that as Johnson fully Americanizes the struggle, he is determined to keep that as low visibility as he can.
I have today ordered to Vietnam the Air Mobile Division and certain other forces which will raise our fighting strength from 75,000 to 125,000 men almost immediately.
So he announces a large-scale escalation in a quiet way, if you will. He refuses the urgings of some advisors to call up the reserves, to put the nation fully on a war footing. He's not going to do it.
My father told me, we're so lucky. We're such a small, poor country. We had nothing to offer the United States, and yet it's sending troops, giving us not only resources, but saving us with their own lives. We thought with the Americans coming in, there was no way the communists could win.